Hey there, I'm Taro. I'm the founder of Syroscape. I've helped companies scale to multiple $1 million per year. And here in today's video, I'm going to be walking through exactly what is going on with AI and why AI is going to mean the end for enterprise SaaS companies in the next few years. So super excited to get into it. Let's jump right in. So AI is right now poised for some very interesting movements, and a lot of companies have not yet taken advantage of the productivity gains that AI can be giving. So a lot of people were like, oh, cool, ChatGPT has come out, but they didn't really do much about it. So there were a few companies that did, and that really piqued my interest and really the reason why I'm making this video. So if you're a B2B SaaS company, you're like, hey, look, we're paying millions of dollars a year for Salesforce or for big softwares, this video is going to be interesting to you because it's going to show you exactly how you can implement these sorts of things exactly how you can implement AI to get massive productivity gains and ultimately save a lot of money and become more efficient as a company. So let's look at this here. Now, number one, the current profit margins in enterprise SaaS is pretty bloated, right? So there's a lot of companies out there that are getting 80+% margins because of this model. And just to break it down and not spend too much time here, but you have to understand the basics of usually there's a subscription-based model for pricing, right? And this is usually around something like users per month, times a user is charged a certain amount per month, times thousands of employees allows them to charge, $100,000, $1 million plus for one client. Now, the other way they make their money is through add-ons and premium services. So for a lot of companies, it's going to be, hey, we'll throttle your software usage, we'll give you analytics, we'll give you access to AI at a higher price point. And of course, there's this element of custom development and integrations. And why was this all so expensive? Well, it was because the bottleneck was developing the new software, right? Developing a custom solution, right? Having a developer sit down that you're paying $500,000 a year is going to be really expensive if you're going to build that for your clients. So you have to charge more, right? So this is why they were able to get away with charging vast amounts of money for, some productivity gains at the time. Right. And so if you look at what they're actually spending their money on, like, for example, like we'll use Salesforce here, they have an enterprise sales team, right? And then they have API development that they have to make, right? And then they also have a massive customer service department because they need to make sure that their customers are happy. Paying that amount of money per year, you're going to make sure that all of the people are looked after and that support tickets are answered, all that sort of stuff, right? If you look down, there's another video I made on sort of the breakdown based on org chart of your SaaS company. When you get into a Series C plus company, a big chunk of your company up until recently, and we'll get into that later in this video, has been customer support. The other large part is sales and marketing. So you have sales and marketing, customer support, and then you have development. Typically, you have CRO and all this stuff, but really customer service is a big part, and then marketing and content, right? Now, in terms of revenue, they get people to sell. They sell people on the front end offer, get them in to use the software and sort of a boilerplate of a solution. And then they cross sell and upsell them. And then there's add-on services for that specific customer, right? Now, why did this model work? What is really the reasoning behind this is, well, one, customers are paying really for customization, right? So there's a boilerplate, which is the SaaS itself. There is the general version, there is Slack, right? And then if you really want to have more, Slack, I don't think does custom developments from my knowledge, right? You can get an API, you can have someone create that, but then you can pay more if you say, hey, I want to have 50 integrations with Slack so that my organization can use Dropbox or Lucidchart or whatever the software, Salesforce or whatnot for leads, right? You can have that, which is then an upsell, right? So you're basically paying for the core building block and then you add on more and you pay more, right? Now, basically you're paying for a scalable architecture. And the reason why you would want to do this and sort of the benefit of using a traditional SaaS model is because once you've started using that SaaS, that it's going to then be scalable for the next X number of years that you continue to grow. That they're able to work with massive corporations as well as just a startup that has, a couple employees. So that's really one of the other reasons to use it. HubSpot is a great example. They've got an interim, sort of introductory offer, and then they also work with massive companies. Another one here, security and compliance, right? If you work with a big established company, they're going to have a lot of the security stuff in place. And for places like Europe, where it's incredibly difficult to innovate and to move quickly, that's really helpful, right? They're going to say, hey, look, we'll prefer that you work with a company that has a lot of these compliance things rather than saying, hey, let's do sort of a nitty gritty or sort of a down and dirty version, which is, something that you coded on your own. They're probably not going to want that. And finally, here's support and uptime SLAs, right? So there are going to be service level agreements in place to make sure that the software you purchase that you're paying all this money for is actually up, right? It's actually running and that it's continuing to work with you and your current needs. So now that you have a pretty good understanding of the current profit margins and why SaaS companies can have such a huge profit margin is because, look, they might pay their devs 1 or 2 times to really develop the base solution. They'll pay the devs to create the software. It takes some time, right? Obviously. But once it's created, the marginal cost of implementation is basically zero, right? Once they do a custom implementation, sure, they can charge a bit for the devs, but they can charge so much more for this ongoing component that's really where their arbitrage is. They've created it one time, and then it's this scalable implementation. Now we're moving to a totally new economy where the entire way in which a SaaS is created is shifting and is then making it much more cheap. Now, just to finish up here, a lot of the reasons why Enterprise SaaS has also been so expensive is because if you're paying for customization, it's solving an issue that you're facing right now, right? If you're paying for a scalable architecture, you're going to be stuck, right? There's this stickiness component, which is, hey, I'm using it right now, and I'm going to continue to use this for the next 5 years. I'm going to stick around, and all my data is here. What would I do if I canceled my subscription? It makes no sense. It would take us so much time and switching cost, right? Then the security stuff, there's sort of this reliability and legal problem from using your own software. So that's one of the other things that right now they do have an edge on AI-based software. And finally, it's the uptime support. There's a reliability and a contingency planning for if something goes wrong, what do we do, right? If our custom software really doesn't work, then what do we do? So that's all in this. Now, the second part of this is really about the modern AI applications that are decimating a lot of these SaaS behemoths, right? So I think in the news, a lot of people have been talking about Klarna, and I dove in, I've listened to a bunch of podcasts and sort of read through a bunch of their blog posts recently for this video. And what I found out was pretty interesting. A couple months back, there was a really big article about Klarna stopping to use a lot of their customer support agents. And the reason is if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. If you have on average one support agent that then is dealing with a handful of requests at one time, right? Say there's 3 or 4 people that they're interfacing with, they're going to be slow, right? Because they'll say, hey, look, I'm waiting on customer A to write back. I'll open up another ticket with customer B. Then customer A writes back, and then you're still dealing with customer B. And then maybe you have C and D, right? There's a lot of people at once. And that resulted in ultimately their average support time, right? For a fintech company, it was about 14 minutes for a resolution, okay? Now, that's average, right? So it could be much longer as well. Now, if we look at that in terms of they created an internal solution for AI, made with AI, and they were able to develop it relatively quickly. Now, what happened? Basically, they were able to get that down to 2 minutes, and they were also able to get a much faster resolution and increase customer satisfaction, right? Now, there's this whole argument. I know you're probably going to say oh, well, people aren't used to it and they'll rather say hey, I want to speak to an agent. But honestly, most people don't care about speaking to a human. All they want to do is have a problem solved. So for the vast majority, say 80% of the problems that are out there, give or take, you can solve those much quicker if you're just getting instant results and actually hammering through this stuff. So that's what they did there. They had 2.3 million conversations, which was 2/3 of their customer service chats, which is the work of the equivalent of 700 full-time agents, right? Which they eventually laid off. And were able to sell, estimated to drive a $40 million USD in profit improvement, right? That's pretty incredible, right? So it's on par with human agents. It's more accurate in error resolution, right? So it's stopping repeat inquiries. They're now getting much faster errands. Okay, so I think in the interview they said 11 minutes here. And it's available in 23 markets, 24/7 and 35 languages. That is incredible. So on that news, there was famously, I forgot the name of the company, but there was a large telecommunications sort of call center company that just totally was destroyed because oftentimes companies like Klarna will contract with external partners for this stuff. And so when there's suddenly no need, these companies lose billions of dollars in market cap because it's showing what a little peek of the future, which is honestly right about now. So Klarna is a company that took advantage of this, which I think is really interesting. And the way that they did this is one in customer service. Again, they did this with marketing, I believe, over here. They cut their agency spend by 25% to run more campaigns. And really famously, if you look into this, what was going on is that marketing agencies, like AI is pretty good, but it kind of goes to the average, right? So it kind of is like, it takes a bunch of data, synthesizes it, and then is able to reproduce average or sort of similar things. Now, creative tasks like music, videography, dancing, like all these things that are sort of very human innate things, it's not great at reproducing, right? It can be great at creating video, but it needs to have a creative person there. So it's not fully replacing the creative side or the agency, et cetera, but they're able to reduce a lot of the stuff where it's regulatory, right? If you make an ad, it has to really make sure that it's allowed. You're allowed to say these sort of claims, right? Or for certain markets, like financial markets, you have to really be clear about, say credit cards. You have to be very conscious of that stuff. So they were able to reduce a lot of that time, which would normally take them 1 or 2 months to create an ad, right? It would now be reduced to a week from conceptualization of an ad to coming up with a video, et cetera, and then getting that thing live. So that's another place where it was just able to save time on a lot of this sort of utilitarian things of like, oh, you need to make, once you have the copy written, then you need to have it approved, and then you can, legal, etc. So you can save a lot of time there. Now, that is really interesting. So let's look at this sort of in what I think is the future of this, because Klarna is great. Like this is one example right now. If a lot of companies start replacing customer service, that's going to be obviously very helpful. If companies start replacing a lot of their marketing and sort of this like very boring technical stuff in marketing, that's going to be really helpful. But the other thing is when you think about SOPs and internal training, right? And this is what they also jumped into is, this is the original model that I showed up top, which is there's a subscription base and there's this number of users. You're not going to be able to try to charge this, millions per year for your clients, right? Now, a lot of companies are getting smart and they're saying, look, we're going to upfront build this out with a bit of cost, with AI and fewer development people to do this in the first place, because AI is already getting you gains in productivity there. You're going to save a lot of time and money, right? And so one time you get a bunch of developers in-house to build this out, you pay for that. Then the only ongoing things, right? You're not going to have to pay, about 80% of what you're paying before. You can pay about 20% less, or pay about 20% of this, so an 80% discount. And you're just paying for server and compute costs, right? For these inquiries, for using this, for keeping it uptime, right? And basically you're going to have a bottom-up approach. And I think this is the genius part about this. And I want to really emphasize this is like, if you're going to build a software from the ground up to fit your organization's needs right now, right? And you have a little bit of foresight and you're thinking, okay, where are we going to be in a year or 2 years from now? You build a much more lean and efficient version of that software, right? So for another example, GoHighLevel. A lot of agencies and marketing people use this, right? It basically does social media, it does website creation, funnels, all this sort of stuff. Now, the interesting thing about that is that it's overwhelming. There's like way too many things to do. So if you can then integrate this, streamline it down and say, look, we only need a CRM. We need to make sure we can email our prospects, and we need to make sure that we're handling customer support requests all in one platform. Boom. Like that's all that you need. And then when you need to integrate with some new API, you just get your team to do that, right? And it's much, much, much more efficient rather than paying for this huge kind of clunky boilerplate. So that's all this. And then you can expand to new features when you need them. And then there's just ongoing maintenance and uptime. That's literally all the costs, which, in dollar values, this is probably 10 to 20% of what you're paying with other massive companies. And most of it is an upfront cost, and it's not a yearly thing. So this is saving like 10x over a few years, right? Or more in terms of productivity gains. So bespoke from day one, you only make features you actually use. You're avoiding bloat of too many features, which is super, super common. And it's easy to centralize the data. And I think the future of where SaaS is going, and the last thing I'll end this video with, is once you have built into your company like an acceptance culture of AI, and you've actually had people that are building this in, you can create something like a knowledge hub. And the reason why this is so important is because if someone's new to your company, and think about AI as also like a person that's new to your company. They don't know the procedures. They don't know how things work, right? And if the more specific you are about the processes and the procedures that this person goes through, the more AI is going to be able to enact and take action on what you've explained, right? So, for example, if customers are talking a lot to your customer service agents or to your AI agents, AI is then going to have that data. It's going to be in your system. And then you can then talk to your internal hub of knowledge and say like, okay, what are customers talking about recently? What are the problems and issues they're facing? Okay, cool. Tell me now, what are potential product updates that would solve these things? And then it can then create that, right? So you get into this best product improvement choices, and then you get more data and then continue to improve your product like that. So I think that's absolutely genius on that front. And secondly, you can build out features and it helps you recommend like what to actually build. And finally, you have documentation internally and externally so that your customers and your people internally know what they're talking about, like how to actually explain to customers what's going on. And if you're new in the company, which is like such a HR nightmare for a lot of companies, is how can you just ask a simple question, right? Have an interface like a chatbot that just makes it super simple to interface with this data. So what I want you to take away from this video is that going forward, we're going to have massive productivity gains. We're just seeing the beginning of it right now. And integrating AI and actually building out these chatbots is not so difficult, and it will save you millions in the future, depending on the size of your organization, obviously. But it's pretty incredible and you shouldn't sleep on it. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to get any more insight into the whole B2B SaaS world, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.